So a warm Vignelli Center welcome to you, Terri, and delighted to have you share a bit about yourself and your work with this group.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh. Can I share my screen so I can put some slides on there? I think right now it's
You sure
disabled.
can.
So thank you, Josh, for that warm welcome. I am delighted to be back in Rochester. I moved back here with my two young kids to be closer to family. I grew up in Brighton, a daughter of immigrant parents, and I haven't been here in quite a few years. So I'm excited to reconnect with the design and creative community here. My background is a little bit unusual. Let's see if I can slide down here. I started at school in a traditional school. I've always been a maker and artist. I've always been creative. My goal was to go to art school, but my parents really wanted me to go to a traditional school to, have a stable career. So I studied philosophy at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. My focus was on environment and human values. And I was really interested in human morality, like what drives us, how do we affect with the community, do we act for the greater good of the common? I did a thesis project on the universal right to reproduce and whether we have that right. During my time at Trinity, I also spent a semester in Kenya with the School for Field Studies, focusing on wildlife and relationship with humans. And I really was drawn to the resourcefulness of Kenyans. Every scrap had a second use, and I was looking back at, wow, look at these products they're making. They took tires and they made custom made sandals that were extremely durable and extremely comfortable. Imbiras, these beautiful instruments as a way to pass time, were made out of scrap metal and wood. And I found myself drawn back to this sort of primal instinct of products and art and the way things are developed. From my studies, I ended up fortunate to get a Fulbright fellowship, and I was teaching English as a second language in Korea, which was really fun. I grew up in Brighton, but I was born in Korea. I came here when I was 7 months old. So I didn't really know much about my roots, and it was a nice chance to sort of rediscover my family there and really understand Korean culture. And one of the things I learned was Koreans love hard work. There's a process and a labor and a value in that. I mean, even in the cooking, I would go to the markets and they would tell me how to make a side dish that was, this tiny, but it meant massaging the vegetable, getting the bitters out of it, salting it. And I really started to understand where my curiosity and my labor of love came from and my interest in process. I found this studio where this woman was making hunji paper, which is made from the bulk of mulberry trees. It's an intensive process of making this paper, and then the paper is dyed. What I found really interesting was that they took this paper and laminated it to build structure. So they built these boxes and pouches out of layers and layers of paper after basically having taken apart this wood. They're basically rebuilding wood. I worked with this artist and collaborated to make this beautiful box for my sister that you can see. They intricately cut the paper and then they laminate it so you can see sort of shadows of each of the layers coming through. So, from Korea, I was in Seattle, I was working in healthcare, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. My sister at the time was working for Kodak as an ethnographer, and she was like, I think you would love industrial design. You're a thinker, you're a tinkerer, you've taken things apart, like this is your calling. And then she sent me an article actually about RIT's industrial design program winning some Tupperware award. And she's like, don't you see yourself doing this? And so I decided, yeah, it seems like a good fit. I was in Seattle, so I went to the University of Washington. I decided to get a second bachelor's in industrial design. What I loved about the program there is they really focused on the cradle to cradle process, the longevity, sustainability. But I was really curious about why some products really hold this emotional connection and have become classics. And so, I did a variety of work after that. I'll show you several slides. I worked both from consultancies, in-house. At the time I was doing a second bachelor's, but I had already had a bachelor's. So I was also interning with the graphic design department, putting together some lectures, just really understanding the whole breadth of design. I really loved this idea of thinking about design in context with the human interactions. So I started working in a consultancy. We designed children's museums, welcome centers. We created interactive games and toys for people to really engage with, to really rethink whatever the content was of that museum. This was a really fun project because we were rethinking the interiors of a retail environment. What does it mean to go and shop? How does that become something more sculptural? We created a point of purchase display that was essentially a sculpture that drew people in to see their most primary products that they had on sale. But we also designed a little kids play area that focused on both the materials that were representative of REI's cooperative and their sustainability, but also to give kids a chance to sort of explore these outdoor products and the hopes that they might be really inspired to go take these products, buy them, and take them outside. We won an interior award for this project for sustainability. It was quite fun. I then started to really go back to my industrial design roots. I really loved this idea of eating and food. My senior project was on, what is our relationship with the products that we use and the tools we use to cook? And I designed some products for Chefin. This one is a tea tree infuser, sort of rethinking the way, oops, sorry, my Zoom meeting finally got through. Really rethinking the way of the tea experience. It was an era where everyone was starting to get into loose leaf tea, and we were trying to think of how do you make that simplicity, but with loose leaf. So we wanted to create a one motion gesture. So the idea was that you fill your tea, you steep it, you bring it to your desk. When you're ready to drink your tea, you just lift it up, flip it over, and the drippings will be caught right on that ceramic tray. The next project was an exclusive for Williams-Sonoma. Everybody knows a spatula, everybody uses a spatula, it's a classic, but in a stand mixer, you often get a little bit of the batter that comes to the edges and doesn't get fully mixed in. And how do you use that activity to push that back in without having to stop the mixer, pull out the batter blade, mix it up again? I mean, the whole idea of a stand mixer is it's supposed to be simple. So I redesigned the classic spatula, changing the profile to a slight curve so that it really could reach the edges of the bowl, and added a wider profile to the handle to give it more stability and control. And then from there, I ended up moving to New York City, and I really found myself drawn back to this idea of wanting to see how people use my products. Chefin was great, and I loved the products, and I loved reading the feedback on Williams-Sonoma's site or on Chefin's site. But I missed the idea of the museum experience, sort of seeing how people interact with it in ways that I might not have expected. So I ended up working for Great Performances, a catering company in New York City. It was a large company. We hosted, anywhere from 5 to 10 large events and small scale events a day. We ran several cafes and restaurants. So I was commissioned to really design and think about food and its vessel as one whole unit. So we designed these custom trays. I collaborated with some local designers. I'm thinking about, okay, we've got this food product. How do we display it so it highlights the food, but also makes the product itself pretty interesting as it's walking around the room or on a table? This zigzag tray was sort of a multi-tiered. You could stretch it out to make it larger, make it smaller, do contrast. There was a lot of different food we could display. We also created some interactive experiences. So the idea of how do you rethink of food and a meal in a coursed meal, instead of having people sit and watch the next plate come in and the next plate come in, how do we engage people, both to stimulate conversation, to, let adults play with their food? Who doesn't love play? I mean, we always pretend that that's for kids, but adults really love it. So we talked about rethinking the crudité experience in this centerpiece. In this one, we talked about, creating your own food, getting out of your chairs and inviting people to be surprised. We had colored chocolate in each of these paint tins, and we had paint brushes. And we were calling people to come and play with their food and then go bring it down to sit. And then you could talk to each other about, what did you create? What was your experience? We also did a profiterole station where you basically got your hands dirty and you filled your own puff pastry with creams and jellies. And, the idea was to push people's comfort level, change the perspective of fine dining and a dining experience, and have fun with it. I also, with Great Performances, helped design a couple of cafes for museums and welcome centers. This one was, the top one was for the Museum City of New York. There was, several things we had to think about. What is the plated food like? What is the grab and go? What is the user experience? We purposely put some really stylish chairs that were not 100% comfortable because the goal was for people to sit and rest, but not plant themselves there. The cafe at the bottom was for signature, it was for a theater. So the idea was it had to be quick. People are either coming in to grab something right before a show starts or in between intermission. So we were trying to think of several different ways of food being displayed and also to speak to our mission. I also did a lot of graphics with them. Great Performances had a nonprofit organization that focused on food education for inner city youth, teaching them where food came from. A lot of the kids didn't have kitchens. Most of them did not know that food came from the ground. We had a farm that we used to take them up to, and we really wanted them to see joy in food and cooking and collaboration. So I created some posters, some t-shirts, some collateral. I've also worked with some small startup companies. This was a company called Fresh Roots, similar to Hello Food or Blue Apron. The idea was a meal kit. But for this particular company, they wanted to focus on the New York City audience. People in New York aren't planners. They don't really want to have a delivery of food at their front steps when they're in an apartment building with no real entry. So the idea was, how do we create these little pop-up shops all over the city in places where people commute and allow them to come grab their food to go home to eat something more fresh than ordering food from the bodega down the street or the restaurant down the street. So this one was at Union Square. We did the whole retail interior lighting, trying to entice people in to come buy a meal. And also, we created these nice little maps that we gave out on the street because, we were underground. We needed people to know that you got to get down there to find us. And it was right before the turnstile, so people could come in, grab their food and go. And I've also done some collateral for the State of Maine Department of Education, also for school-age children to learn more about the local foods and seasonal eating, showcasing the variety of flavors, shapes, and different products that come out of Maine. We made little stickers so kids would be excited that they maybe tried new foods or tried different vegetables they weren't used to. And we designed some posters so that they could put it up in the school and around the cafeteria for students to be able to see what it is that they were eating, as these products were obviously transformed into their lunch menus. And then a recipe card for the staff and for the educators at the school. I also have been doing some styling and playing with food. I'm just really fascinated. I guess I went from real products and ceramics. I've created my own ceramics. I had a studio for a while. I love working with wood, but I started to find this beauty in food and really loved that it is a product that is temporary, that you engage with, that we all have a real visceral experience with. We're all familiar with it. So I've done some styling and really rethinking the way the food experiences. And I like storytelling. I think that it's something that I've always been drawn to as a philosopher. My dad used to say, you know how to read and write, now what are you going to do? And I realized that I like thinking about what is this experience and what do we do and what is our story? What is our story of our products? So who am I as a creative? I guess I'm a little jack of all things. I really love all things creative. I've worn several different hats. I've been teaching. I taught a food design class at Pratt, and I'm currently teaching design fundamentals with a small college in Boston, Pine Manor. And it's all shaped the way that I think and approach design in our everyday world. One of the things I keep going back to is, what do our objects tell us? I was drawn to industrial design because I like thinking about products and material objects and the things that I love. I mean, I still hold on to my wooden spoon. But what is that vernacular? What is the language of objects? And why is it that we hold on to certain ones? I love designing for Chefin, but I wanted to hear what other people felt like. Which of my products that I've had do they hold on to, and who designed it and why? I really love that every design has a great story and we're drawn into it. But I'm also really inspired by traditions and the process. I guess I'm Korean at heart, right? So I love this idea that there is an art to an experience of cooking. And I recreated this event that I'd heard about in France. They do a mussels éclade, and they basically steam these mussels that they've tiled on the fin of the mussels under a bed of pine needles. If you can see from this little corner, there's 4 little nails that you kind of embed into the corner of the wood, and that starts the balance, and you start balancing these mussels, and they look and smell beautiful. And I was drawn to both the board that I made, to the experience, and I noticed that people, we did it on the beach, and people started coming over asking what it was. You could hear the mussels start to whistle, you could smell the pine needles burning, and it really starts telling a story about the experience. They're beautiful, and people really were drawn to try mussels. I mean, a bunch of my friends were like, "Oh, I don't like mussels." But once you see it and you experience it, and then you see this burned board at the end, you're drawn to eat it. You've got to try it. Just what did that transformation cause? And is it different than I'm expecting? So for me, I really find beauty in nature, in food, in transformation. I did a whole experiment where I was really dehydrating food and thinking about what does that mean for us from a design perspective? What do we see in nature that we can emulate? The colors, the textures. What about this process? I did a residency where I was really thinking about how does food transform from the multitude of colors of carrots to the different fruit we have, and how does that experience really change us? And this quote is kind of something I really love, and why I love working with food right now as much as I can. You know, eating is influenced by hearing, sight, or touch, as well as flavor. We prefer apples that crunch loudly, steaks that look blood red, sauces so smooth they seem to caress the insides of our throats. Um, it's a visceral feeling. And I feel like sometimes with certain design products, you really have this visceral feeling. And it's something I really enjoy about food, that it's temporary, you have an experience, and you have this memory based on smell and taste and touch. And I think a really great product also does that. So for me, design is something that brings pleasure, choice, strength, beauty, compassion. It makes us think. And often all of this happens without us really noticing it. I mean, I remember thinking about industrial design and thinking, oh, someone designed that cup, like thought it through. Like it was a profound idea that my favorite kitchen tools are my favorite tools. Someone actually thought through the experience I was going to have. So that's a little bit about me. I like to do a variety of things. I'm teaching right now. I'm looking sort of to expand my food experiences, maybe for the everyday people, but you know, look forward to meeting all of you and hearing more about what's happening here, and maybe putting my finger in something here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Terry. That was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.